Hello and welcome to the Tough Cover Radio Show with your host, Mark Henry Jr. As always, you can follow me on Twitter at Mark Henry Jr. _ We are airing this on iHeartRadio, on Fox Sports The Gambler. You can check that out at foxphlgambler.com. And my co-host, as always, on the ones and twos is Sean Barnard. You can follow him on Twitter at Sean _ Barnard1. Sean, outside of Sixerland, how are we doing?
Yeah, anything is better than Sixers land right now. I'll tell you that. So yeah, happy to talk about everything beside that at this point. Overall, can't complain. Life is pretty good. We're still in the prime time of sports season, so I can't be mad about that. Saw an awesome football game last night with snow everywhere. That was incredible. That gave me a little bit of football spirit again, which I've been missing. I've been fully in the basketball world, 10 toes down in there, so got me back in on a little bit of the taste for football. I'll say that.
Yeah, and just for anybody out there, obviously Sean Barnard. It's kind of funny. I've got Sean Barnard here, one of the best Sixers follows on the internet, and we're not going to talk Sixers today. And I know that's going to disappoint some who want to hear us crap on them. But if you're watching live, you know we're recording this on Friday, so before tonight's game. So we don't want to give you any outdated information on Saturday morning when we're airing this live. Sean has plenty of places that you can go and check out his thoughts on what's been happening with the Sixers, with Sean Brace, with Ryan Coyle, and plenty of others. So as we said, Sean _ Barnard1, check out all things Sixers over there, because honestly, I'm too disgusted to even talk about the Sixers right now. But, you know, Jared McCain, I can't believe they're ruining the Jared McCain experience for someone who was so high. Jared McCain, I mean, you've been on this show now with me for 2 years. I've given plenty of draft takes. I don't know if any have been justified as quickly as Jared McCain has justified some of the draft takes I gave out. The Sixers aren't letting us enjoy it.
Yeah, like historic stuff. The most combined points in the first 4 starts from any rookie ever since the NBA merger we're talking about. He's been incredible. So I do think that is like something to hang your hat on, but 2-12 is 2-12 at the point of recording this. Before they better be 3-12 by the time this is airing at this point. But even that, we shouldn't be running any victory laps by any means. I got a long way to dig out of this hole.
Yeah, they definitely do. And you mentioned Thursday Night Football, so I'm not going to get too much into the game, too much into what happened, you know, the snow game. I'm not going to even kill Pittsburgh for losing. I think the elements like that really hurt you. But what it does is it eliminates some of the margin for error that Pittsburgh had. And I think a bet that you can make, hopefully, that this line is the same on Saturday morning. Right now on DraftKings, the Baltimore Ravens are minus 120 to win the AFC North.
Wow.
On many other books, not as good of a price. Let's just say that, like 40, 50 points higher. So I think that there's a really, really good odds opportunity if you believe in Baltimore, especially this week on Monday Night Football against the Chargers. Then you should load up, because you look at what Pittsburgh has on the schedule upcoming. They have a stretch where they play at Eagles, at Ravens, home against the Chiefs in 13 days.
Wow.
Or actually, no, I apologize. I read that tweet that it was in 13 days. The game against the Eagles is on the 15th. The game against the Ravens is on the 21st. And then the game against the Chiefs on the 25th. That's 10 days.
Wow.
That's 3 games in 10 days against, arguably, in my opinion, 3 of the top 5 teams in the NFL.
Yes.
Not to mention you've got 2 games with the Bengals in there as well. Who knows? I mean, they're not an easy out by any means, especially next week.
They're in must-win position every week at this point.
Yeah. Maybe week 18, they won't be trying, but next week in Cincy, they're going balls to the wall in that game against Pittsburgh. In fact, Cincy's favored right now in that game against Pittsburgh for a reason. So I'm just saying, I mean, Baltimore does not have an easy schedule either. They still have the Eagles. They still have the Steelers. I think they have a Texans game. But on top of having the Browns game that the Bengals also have, they have a Giants game sprinkled in there. They might have a Cowboys game sprinkled in there. Another kind of easy one in there. So Baltimore obviously lost that game to Pittsburgh. That was in Pittsburgh. I think in Baltimore probably returns the favor. And then you look at the rest of the schedules. I think there's a big opportunity to take Baltimore at minus 120. Any takeaways from that or from last night's game?
Yeah, I mean, I've been a Pittsburgh believer kind of from the start of the season. Mike Tomlin, I still tip my cap and been pretty impressed with how they looked. I don't have a lot of takeaways from last night that I do think that's one you brush up to the elements to an extent that, you know, the Browns they got a little bit of the Jameis buzz about them, that there is a different life to the franchise. And I do think like a snow game like that, I'm not going to come down too hard on the team there, but it is a tough path. Like you laid out a strong argument there. There's no doubt about it. I think Baltimore is very clearly like cream of the crop right there. I would say probably the team that has impressed me the most as a whole on the entire season, although their defense certainly has some concerns. So that's kind of keeping me back from being all in on the bandwagon there. But I don't know. I still like Pittsburgh. I think we're going to really find out if this team is legitimate over this next stretch. So I think this is going to be an interesting kind of period of football. I still think they'll find their way in the playoffs for sure.
Oh,
we'll see how things shake out. Yeah.
Yeah. And that was my thing. Like, I've been higher on Pittsburgh than anybody. I think I tweeted out before last week's game that I had bet on them in every game but one this season. Wow. And that had been a pretty good strategy for most of it. But I here's where I get off the train when we start talking about them as a contender and we start talking about them as someone who can make the Super Bowl, because I don't see that. I know that they beat Baltimore. I walked out of that game feeling better about Baltimore and worse about Pittsburgh. I know people are going to think that's crazy. They had two fumbles and one that was an interception, quote unquote, but it was literally ripped out of the guy's hands. By the way, I don't know if anyone's seen all of Lamar's 3 interceptions have either been tipped off of his players' hands or ripped out of their hands. And so 3 fumbles and 2 missed kicks from the Ravens in that game. And if they make a 2-point conversion at the end of the game, they win the game. So to me, I know people are, Pittsburgh won. I know that's how you're going to look at it. I walked out of that game feeling better about Baltimore. Now you could say Justin Tucker's a serious problem. I'd be willing to listen to that.
There is a conversation there.
Yeah, there's a conversation to be had about Justin Tucker for sure. And there might be one to be had about Jake Elliott in Philadelphia as well. But we're going to get to that. Let's switch over. I wanted to touch on the AFC North a little bit there. But let's get over to the college football to get the picks out to the people. I've only got 6 picks this week. Only 6 on the board, but there's 2 or 3 that I absolutely love on the college football board so far. Actually, I have 7. I lied. I have 7 college football plays this week. Anything sticking out to you while we're sitting here on Friday, Sean Barnard?
Yeah, not a ton for as far as college football overall for me. So I'm kind of getting in the mud a little bit. I do lean towards Ohio State blowing out Indiana and kind of making things a little bit more comfortable. I'm seeing them as 10.5-point favorites. I like that number there, that I do think that we're going to kind of see the gap here. And I think that's going to clean up a lot of this playoff conversation. That's obviously the kind of the game that I have my biggest eyes on heading into this week. So the minus 10.5 in favor of Ohio State, probably the only one I have a real strong feeling about, but don't love the board overall this week, I'll say.
I'm staying away from the Indiana-Ohio State game. I think it's probably a fair line, that 10.5 number. I would lean Ohio State. I think at a certain point, the X's and O's stop mattering and the Jimmies and Joes start mattering. Yeah. And I think this is a prime situation of that probably. Now, I think the more interesting conversation is, and now you said you like Ohio State minus 10.5. I don't know if you think it's going to be 3-4 touchdowns, a blowout. But if it is a blowout, I don't know how plugged in you are on college football Twitter and all the wars that are being waged this week from the SEC media and then the anti-SEC media. I actually have a long-standing take that the anti-SEC people that are like, oh, the SEC's taking all of our fun away and they just want to get all their teams in. I think they're more annoying than the SEC guys that are like, well, if you played this game in Vegas, we'd be like a 10.5-point favorite, but Georgia's 11 and Indiana's 5. I kind of lean towards the SEC side of things, and I know that people aren't going to like to hear that. But if Indiana comes out and loses this game and gets blown out by more than 3 touchdowns, I don't want to see them in the playoff. There's too many good teams this year. There's too many deserving teams. Give me 10-2 Tennessee and 10-2 Ole Miss and 10-2 Alabama and 10-2 Georgia and maybe a 10-2 Texas if they were to suffer a loss. I'll take all those teams over an Indiana team. Now, if Indiana comes out and Indiana shows that they can stand up to the big boy and they can hang with Ohio State and keep it within that spread, they're in.
Yeah. No, I agree with that completely. And I like that this is the matchup because we actually get the proof in the pudding here of see how do these teams look compared. These are like, to me, I think there's so much noise and I'm curious when we actually see this, like the playoffs settle in, if they start to change sort of the outlook for, the requirements for the conferences and all that kind of thing here, because I do think it's being overcomplicated. Get the 12 best teams in the playoffs. And I understand it's baby steps to get there, but just looking at these 2 conferences and most specifically talking about the Big 12 and SEC here, like when we're talking about BYU and Colorado as your top 2, which I got a ton of respect for Colorado and what they've done this year. But neither of those teams, to me, are in the nearly the same boat as the Texas, the Georgia, the Tennessee, the Texas A&M, the Alabamas. Like, I get the equality of things and giving each team a chance and all that type of thing. But this is about getting the best football teams into me. So I hear you on the annoyance of all of it. You're certainly more in the sticks than I am for those type of conversations. But I do think like the bottom line to me is whoever the best teams are should be in. And I don't think that fits Indiana. And I think we're going to see that this weekend.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. And, Indiana was a team that I was propping up a lot all year long. Me and Beef, have been betting on them almost every week. That Michigan game was concerning to me. And, I'm not saying that the season's over because they played a close game against Michigan, but my defense for them all year long was, yeah, the schedule's not good, but they're pummeling everybody. They're beating the crap out of everybody they see. And then they saw Michigan, and it was ugly. I mean, Michigan had a chance to win that game, and I think Michigan's a really bad team. So I think that is kind of where I pumped the brakes. I think normally I'd be on the other side of this Indiana debate. They're 10-0, let them lose before, we take them out of the playoff. That game or maybe 2 weeks ago, I think they had a bye. That game against Michigan was pretty concerning, in my opinion. So that's where I'm at with it. I'm staying away. I would lean Ohio State, kind of rooting for Ohio State to pummel them. To be honest,
misery.
That maybe that's evil. And Brandon Walker and Big Cat have talked about it. We don't root for the underdog anymore. And I don't know what that is about this country. I don't know why we don't. And I'm kind of in the same boat. I don't really care if Indiana makes the playoffs if we get there and then it's an ugly, game where they get blown out by an Alabama or something like that. Give me Tennessee, who seems to be the team that might get cut here on the cut line. And it seems to be total recency bias. Ole Miss has lost to two teams that are not in this, LSU and Kentucky. And obviously you have the bad loss for Tennessee. You also have a loss to Georgia. Like, it's a little bit different when your two losses are to teams out of the discussion. And one of the losses is to Georgia in Athens if you're Tennessee. And I get Ole Miss just beat Georgia. Well, guess what? Tennessee beat Alabama about a month ago. Alabama beat Georgia. Like, I don't understand what world Ole Miss has a better resume than Tennessee. And the reason I'm getting upset about it, Ole Miss, not a team I think can win the national championship.
Yeah.
Tennessee, I think if they got in and they got the right draw, there's a good chance they could go on a deep run. That defense is special, in my opinion.
Yeah, agree with that. I'm more concerned with Nico than I thought would be the case at this point.
Yeah.
We get it. He's a freshman. I think we're going to have a very different tone when speaking about him a couple seasons from now, 1 or 2 years from now, for how good he looks on the field. I have questions there, but the defense is legit. And I still am pretty optimistic Tennessee finds its way in. It really would have to be chalk from here on out for that not to be the case. Yes. And I just feels incredibly unlikely to me that is. So I think one way or another, one of these teams, whether it is Ole Miss or whoever, just has a slip up or a moment for that paves the way for Tennessee to find their way, which I think should be the case. So I'll be rooting for that as well.
And I just want to lay this out for people. Maybe this is a little going extra on it, but I think some people look at the college football playoff rankings and they don't understand, you have the bracket, you have the rankings.
I'm still a little bit there, to be honest.
Okay. So let's simplify it a little bit for people. Let's say Boise's the G5 champ.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say ACC gets a team in. I don't think that's not a too big league. Like if Miami loses to SMU, Miami's not getting in. Like, I understand they're sitting at 8 right now, but that's one of those teams gets in and that's it. And then you either get a Big 12 champ or Sean Barnard. There's a chance that the Big 12 is left out entirely. If let's say Colorado, who's only a 3-point favorite to Kansas, loses this week. Let's say Arizona State, who is a 3-point favorite against BYU, beats BYU this week. Then you maybe get a 3-loss team beating Arizona State in the Big 12 championship, like a K-State or an Iowa State. There's a good chance that they decide we're going to put Tulane in over whoever that Big 12 champ is, and the Big 12 might get left out entirely. That's an interesting kind of thing. Personally, I am not betting Colorado, Kansas this week. I believe in this Colorado team, though. I think they're going to figure out a way to get the job done and to beat Kansas. It might be ugly. Kansas playing really good football, but I think they win it. And if they win this week, they will beat Oklahoma State. So I am definitely leaning towards Colorado getting into the playoff and being the team that's there and just almost deserving to be there, maybe. But you take those 3 teams out. That means that there's 9 spots, I'd say, for 10 teams. There's 9 spots for 10 teams. You have Oregon, Ohio State, Texas, Penn State, Indiana, Notre Dame, which we'll get back to, Alabama, Ole Miss, Georgia, and Tennessee. And like you said, the only way Tennessee's getting left out is if we get full chalk from the whole board. We get, Georgia not losing to a Georgia Tech.
Yeah, and we'll see how it shakes out with that. I can't imagine a world where we get full chalk from the last two weeks of college football. That it feels like this is the perfect time for the madness to fully tip off here. So I do think that's probably the pathway towards Tennessee making its way, and that's kind of rightfully the case. Like, I do want to dig in a little bit on the Notre Dame conversation whenever you want to get to that, because I thought that loss would fully exclude them there. I'm surprised to see like how much of a lock they seem. I get they're playing great football, but you seem to share that same tune.
Yeah, I definitely do. Real quick, just laying out the other teams that you could get a Tennessee loss to Vandy. You could get a Georgia loss to Georgia Tech. You could get an Ole Miss loss to a Florida team this week. You could get an Alabama loss in the Iron Bowl to Auburn, or this week to Oklahoma. You could get a Notre Dame loss either this week to Army or next week to USC. Obviously, Indiana could lose by 40 and get taken out of this thing entirely. Penn State, not in solidly. If you go lose to Minnesota or Maryland, you're out, in my opinion, especially when you don't have a big win to hang your hat on. But yeah, Notre Dame, let's get back to it. Notre Dame is one of the harder conversations of all time in these college football playoff things because their margin of victory has been the highest in the country since losing to Northern Illinois. They've truly probably been one of the 2 or 3 best teams in the country since that day. But that day doesn't get erased. Like, they lost to Northern Illinois, and I think they should be on the outside looking in. I think if I was a Tennessee fan, I'd be losing my mind at Notre Dame, not at Indiana and Penn State, which it's pretty crazy. Like, there's all these debates going on, and I'm a Notre Dame guy, and I have to like raise my hand and be like, why are we not bringing up Notre Dame at all as a team that could get left out? It seems like they're just in solidly if they take care of business. Now, if they will take care of business is a different conversation because they only open up as a 6.5-point favorite at USC next week. That is going to be a scary, scary game in Hollywood next week. I'm terrified of it. I predicted before the year that Notre Dame would either be undefeated or have one loss going into that game and would lose at USC. And USC season has not went well. Doesn't mean they can't play spoiler. I do think Notre Dame takes care of Army this week, though. Let's get to the picks. Let's get back to the picks. And let's transfer. I only have 7 on the board at 2:00, skipping the whole noon slate. Wow. Not great. I love betting on noon football. There's nothing I love more than noon football. Ohio State might make its way onto the card. If that number gets to 9.5, 10, I'm definitely going to bet it. If it sticks at 10.5, I lean it and I might bet it. But I keep going back and forth. I almost feel disrespectful to Indiana, to how much I've bet on them all year long, to turn my back on them and fade them in the biggest game of their year. But at 2:00, I'm going with Rice, -6.5 at UAB. UAB is an absolute joke of a program. I know that, Rice is not a good team. They're sitting here at 3-7. But Trent Dilfer's coaching UAB. They're 2-8. And you look at kind of the recent college football math, not always the smartest arithmetic to play. But UAB played Memphis. They lost 53-18. Rice played Memphis the week before. They lost 27-20. UAB got blown out by UConn. Rice kept it close within a touchdown. There's more examples of that throughout the year. If you just compare common opponents, I think Rice is the far better team. That you have a battle of Kurt Warner's son against John Kitna's son in this one for Rice UAB. But I'm going with Rice, laying 6.5 on the road with Rice. Did not think that's where I'd be going in late November. At 3:30, I've got Arizona State -3 against the Mormons. I apologize to BYU, but this is where the road ends. Arizona State. Desmond Howard didn't even know why they were picking the game last week on College Game Day. 7-2, Arizona
Which is
State.
Embarrassing, by the way.
Embarrassing. He should be fired on the spot for how bad he is on the show, regardless. But that is so embarrassing. You look at the way Kirk looked at him when he said it. It was like Kirk follows it enough to know. Clearly, like even McAfee didn't give any sort of answer like that, and McAfee's not plugged in like every day like the sickos are. So
Saban looked offended too.
Yeah, it's offensive to not to say about a 7-2 Power 4 team. Be like, why are we even picking this? Arizona State. What? the guy's a joke. I really hope it's his last season on college game day. But moving on to the next one at 7:00, I'm laying them with Notre Dame. Give me all 14 points. You look at what they did against Navy. I think Army and Navy thrive against teams that don't see the triple option. And then when they do, it's a total shock. Notre Dame has years and years of experience. Al Golden, defensive coordinator, and Marcus Freeman, a head coach, calling plays for the defense as well. Both have a ton of experience dealing with the triple option. And I think they showed this year against Navy. I forget who I heard say it, but when you run the triple option and there's these trickery plays where, oh my God, there's an open field, you do that against Notre Dame and there's two guys in front of you. It's just, it's a different thing than playing against Memphis or Tulane or whoever you want to say. And those teams are good. I just use like the good versions of the AAC. But any take on this one for you?
Yeah, I do lean towards Notre Dame taking care of business here. It is pretty crazy kind of scrolling back through their schedule here because I am so scarred from that loss. That is absolutely inexcusable to start this year. I was in on the Notre Dame train, but then looking at the last few weeks, like 35-14 over Virginia, 52-3 over Florida State, who stink, but 52-3 is still 52-3. Beat Navy 51-14, 31-13 over Georgia Tech, 49-7 over Stanford. Like, these are impressive results here. I do think that continues rolling to an extent. I'm very curious about next week against USC. Way more cautious about that game. But I do think that the buzz about Army potentially being like a fringe playoff team, that gets put to bed this week by Notre Dame for sure.
Yeah, and Army helped Notre Dame out by being 9-0 at this point. Now you have what looks like a good win for Notre Dame. And the interesting thing for Notre Dame at this point, if you win out, you have a chance to be the 5 or the 6 seed, which seems like that's the magic spot because you play, especially if you're the 5, you play the 12 seed, who is probably either going to be a G5 team or a Big 12 team, so not Alabama or Georgia or Tennessee. And then if you win that game, you play the 4 seed, so a G5 or a Big 12 team. Like, you get 2 games you'll be favored in, no matter who the 5 seed is, pretty much. 6 seed, not
where
too
you
different.
at on our boy Riley Leonard, by the way?
He's not very good at throwing the football.
Yeah, I think that's unfortunately the reality.
He's a great runner. He's a great runner, but he'll give you like 150 to 200 yards in a game. I'm a little worried when we get to big time matchups against SEC teams and the top Big Ten teams that Riley Leonard's kind of passing becomes an issue.
Yeah, I think that's completely fair. I've been a Riley Leonard guy. I've been very disappointed. I thought there was another level that he could get to this year, and that just does not seem to be the case.
Yeah, and I don't think the receiver room's very good either. Not to take too much blame off him. He makes some terrible throws and some terrible reads, but I don't think he has a ton of help with guys getting crazy open. He just has to rely on the tight ends and the running backs so much at times, it feels like. But moving on to the next one, 7:30, my second favorite play of the day. Alabama laying them minus 13.5 at Oklahoma. Oklahoma has won one of their last 5 games. This is the biggest home dog that Oklahoma has been since 1996. They have not been this big of a home dog since then. So I don't believe that Oklahoma's figuring it out. I will say that spreads within 8 to 14 points. That is like upset alert watch. Like, keep your eyes out for one of those Minnesota, Alabama teams to fall and to help this kind of college football playoff. Don't think it's happening here, though. I'm not that huge on this Alabama team like other people are, and I've been skeptical of them throughout the year. But I think that they're going to come up and lay a smackdown on Oklahoma. The only thing that concerns you is it a letdown before playing their rival in Auburn, but Auburn kind of stinks this year. So I'm not worried about it. Laying them with Bama, roll tide.
I like it. I probably lean the same direction here. I'm starting to come around on this Alabama team that I've held them in an arm's distance for a lot of the season, not fully buying in. We'll see how things shake out. I like kind of how across the board these next 2 weeks line up as far as having a true feel for how these teams stand. I'm cautiously optimistic about this Bama team. I think Jalen Milroe, we'll see how it I still have my doubts at some of kind of the intermediate passing and across the field stuff, but I think he's gotten better this year and as the season has progressed as a whole. So I have more confidence in them than I felt at pretty much any other point this season.
Another SEC game. I'm taking Vandy +8 at LSU, laying or giving them with Diego Pavia. You look at what LSU's done against running quarterbacks. It's been terrible. They get torn apart every time they face a quarterback who has any sort of athleticism. Pavia can tear you apart on the ground. I think that's exactly what's going to happen. I think Vandy wins outright here in Death Valley. I think LSU's quit on the season.
Yeah, they look bad. Brian Kelly, embarrassing stuff. Garrett Nussmeier, so much more of a mess than I expected could be the case too, and just falling apart at really the most important time. When kind of talking about like looking ahead to the NFL draft side of things, I have like severe doubts about just about every one of these top options here. So
Yeah.
it's going to be an interesting offseason for that side of things.
Yeah, I'm pretty out on the quarterback class.
Yeah.
I think I'll probably only have one graded as a first rounder. That'll
Shador.
be Shador.
Yeah.
Yeah. And even Shador, like there's some pocket stuff that concerns you. There's some leadership stuff that I don't
Yeah.
really usually get too involved with that I
He's
think
slow
concerns
too.
you. It's weird. He's slow when he's trying to like scramble without running. When he just runs and just commits to running, and it's almost a little bit like Jalen sometimes, where Jalen, I hate the designed runs and how he tries to break people down in the backfield as opposed to just sprinting. And I feel the same way with Shador. I think the bigger problem is sometimes he just doesn't see the guys coming or doesn't feel the pressure until it's too late to get away from. But yeah, I will say you'd think Deion's son would be faster.
Unbelievable.
You would think that, but he's not. I don't think he'd be on the low end of athleticism in quarterbacks in the NFL. Like I think he'd be average to above average in terms of athleticism.
I don't know. That might be higher than I would put him. Like,
okay.
Is he a better athlete than
Combine?
Yeah, we'll see. I guess we can have this conversation in the future. But my question was about to be: do you think he's a better athlete than Brock Purdy?
No.
Okay, because I was going to say no to that as well. I think that Brock's pretty far better than anyone could have expected, and we're seeing more and more of that lately. But I'm interested where he fully fits in that mix.
The Purdy thing's a whole conversation to have. Maybe I don't know if it's today, but maybe at a different time.
It's crazy, man.
Been blown away by Brock
Yeah.
Purdy this year. And it's funny to say it in a year where their offensive numbers are down, like his numbers are down.
Might not make the playoffs.
They might not make the playoffs, sitting there around 500. But every time I watch them, I'm like, man, this guy's so much better than I thought he could ever be.
Yeah.
My best bet for Saturday, it's dropped a little bit. I got it at +3.5. You can still get it at +3. My Dukies, they've been the second best team against the spread over the last 3 years. Now I know Manny Diaz, this is his first year at the helm, but you look at Manny Diaz, they're 7-3 against the spread this year, 5-1 against the spread as an underdog with 3 outright wins. They're 2-0 as a home dog with 1 outright win. I just think this is a spot where Duke comes out and they get their 8th win. Virginia Tech has kind of mailed it in a little bit after getting a little bit hot before November. Now they've lost 2 straight. I just don't see Kyron Drones was playing really well. Then he got hurt. He came back last week, did not play well at all. 9 for 20, 115 yards. He ended up getting either benched or left the game for their backup, who I think is terrible, in Colin Schley. Every time I see Colin Schley play, I'm blown away by how bad he is. And then at my last play of the night, 10:30, Colorado State +3.5 at Fresno State. I just think Colorado State's the far better team. I understand that it's in Fresno. Colorado State's covered and won 5 straight games. Fresno's failed to cover 4 of their last 5. Colorado State has a massive, massive advantage when it comes to the quarterback position. Maybe not massive, but I think they have the better quarterback. They have a better running game. Fresno State might have a better defense, but I'm going with Colorado State given the points. I think they win outright late night at 10:30. Let's switch over to the National Football League. And let's talk a little bit about the 1 o'clocks. Let's start with the Detroit Lions. Let's start with the Detroit Lions at the Indianapolis Colts. I have not been someone who lays points with the Lions a ton this year, and that's to my detriment because they've been very good against the spread. And maybe I'm cursing them here. I'm coming in and riding here. I'm laying the 7 points with Detroit. I kind of love that Anthony Richardson looked so good last week. I think some people are going to come out and expect him to continue that. I think it's going to be hard for him to have a repeat of that game against someone other than the Jets defense that is totally quit on the season. I think the Lions force Richardson into some turnovers, into some rough plays. And I think that's, if you give the Lions some turnovers on offense, I think they're going to cover the spread.
Yeah, I'm all over the Lions at -7.5 here. They've looked unbelievable. I think, but like the most complete team in football these past few weeks, and that being while Aiden Hutchinson is out. The offense is just unreal. There's no stop to it. Ben Johnson continues to get more creative. They're running hook and ladders in like the second quarter of games these days. It's absurd stuff, and I'm with you, Anthony. Anthony Richardson is this is a weird comp to me, but I think they follow the same trend as Karis LeVert in the NBA. And what I mean by that is that you spin the wheel and you never know what player they're going to turn out with. There's some days where they'll look like the best player on the field and some days where they don't belong at their respective professional sport. I think that is the case with Richardson. I don't feel great about him being to repeat a pretty good performance. That was the case last week. I do think there's a little built-in cushion for that number, for that being factored in, but I'm pretty out on the Richardson experience as a whole. I don't really know where Indianapolis goes from here, but I do think this week they get cleaned up pretty good.
Yeah, and I'm also on Amon-Ra, St. Brown touchdown there. It's at -110 on some books. It's all over the place to be quite honest, depending on where you're looking, do your research. But he scored an 8 straight. I'm riding it until he doesn't. And honestly, after that point, the odds might drop down and get back to plus money like they were last week. So I'd probably ride it even if he didn't score 1 or 2 times in a row. But they look for him in the red zone. He makes plays happen from outside of the red zone.
And they score a ton.
And they score a ton. That helps too. Yeah. But Amon-Ra, I think he's one of the 5 best receivers in football. And I don't think he gets thrown around in the conversation nearly enough. And, people want to talk about like Jahmyr Gibbs and, the Lions, you guys were wrong. Just criticize them drafting Jahmyr Gibbs, who's awesome. But if you want to point to the pick that has set up this Lions tenure for success more than any, it's finding Amon-Ra St. Brown where they did. It's so hard to find legitimate number 1 wide receivers. I mean, look around the NFL, how many teams don't have one? It's crazy. And we know the importance of it here in Philly once we added AJ and even once we added Devontae before that. We know how hard it can be to find that top receiver. And I think that's the most important pick Detroit made throughout this entire thing. Maybe besides Hutchinson, who's not even there now. But just wanted to throw that out there. People don't talk about Amon-Ra enough, even though he scores every single week.
Mm-hmm.
Another game I wanted to – I'm sorry.
No, and he can do it all. It was going to be kind of my point there. It's like, this is not a guy who's a gimmick receiver. This is not a guy who's just a possession receiver. You can pretty much play him any way you want to, give him any sort of opportunity. He's going to deliver. So I'm with you. I do think he's one of the more underappreciated superstars in this league. And the Amon-Ra love has not been nearly as strong as the play is deserved.
I agree. This is one I'm not that confident in. I'm kind of I have a Patriots fetish. I'm addicted to betting the Patriots. I'll tell you, he's going to be the best quarterback from that draft class. I love Drake May. But give me Pats plus 7.5 here. I think it's just a lot of points. The only thing that makes me nervous is their coach is a coward. Had a big bet on them plus 5 last week, kicked a field goal from the 2-yard line, kicked a field goal, like down 11. Gerard Mayo, it's actually a shame that Drake May's like saved him probably. Like there's no way he gets fired. But it's a shame. They should have won that. The Patriots, I don't know if they outplayed the Rams. They played as good as the Rams in that game. And I think Gerard Mayo cost them potentially winning that game. They've still covered 3 of the last 4 going. And Miami has covered 3 straight, but they haven't been favored by 7.5 in those games. So give me New England given the points.
Yeah, I lean that direction. Don't have a strong play for it. I will say I agree with you that I think Gerard Mayo has saved his job. And I think really the selling point that he'll lean on is we did everything right with the development of Drake May, that we kept him out a couple weeks. We turned it over when it was time, and now he's benefiting from it. So he's built up a little bit of leash that way. This Miami team, I can't believe. I just thought they were going to be better, and I can't believe, like, even with Tua back, they don't have that same luster offensively. It's obviously far better than without Tua, which was straight up disastrous as an offense. But I do think that there's a lot to like about this Patriots team, and I'm encouraged by the way that they're closing the season, even if the results are not going to fully show that.
Probably not too much time we have to spend here, but the Kansas City Chiefs at the Carolina Panthers. I don't think this line's big enough. I'm laying them with the 10.5 points. I'm taking KC minus 10.5. I think it's a bit of a revenge spot, not revenge on the Panthers, but revenge from last week losing. You come out hot and a little bit more focused. I like Kansas City to roll here.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm surprised the number's at 10.5, to be honest. This I would have expected to be a 2-touchdown plus type of spread, minus 14 or something along those lines. Is not the case. So yeah, Kansas City still hasn't quite hit their peak offensively. Feels like they're still like ramping up to an extent. I thought like last week they made it a conscious effort to get Xavier Worthy more involved. There's been weeks where it's like clearly like lean on DeAndre Hopkins. Let's get him in the flow of things. Feels like they have not found that exact, like, okay, now we got everything clicking. Now we're hitting our stride. Could happen this week, and that would be ugly for the Panthers. It will happen before the playoffs. I pretty much have no doubt about that.
Yeah, I agree for sure. They'll be right there. Another bet. I'm actually not betting a side on this one, but the Dallas Cowboys at the Washington Commanders. Washington 10.5-point favorites. We talked about the Lions. We talked about the Chiefs. My teaser of the week. This is my favorite teaser we've had all year, where I've been 5-0 on teasers, putting 5 units on it. Chiefs -0.5 at the Panthers. Basically, Chiefs to beat the Panthers. Lions +2.5 at the Colts. Commanders pick 'em against the Cowboys. So basically, Chiefs and Commanders to beat the Panthers and Cowboys, and the Lions to cover 2.5 against the Colts. I love it.
Yeah, I like it.
How does it lose, Sean Barnard?
I don't know. I've always heard the cardinal rule of not teasing across the point line, meaning from like minus to plus there. I've never fully understood why that is the case there, but I just something that popped up when you said that.
Yeah, the teaser people love to say you should actually take the underdog that's like a 6 to 8 point dog and tease them up to like 16, 18. Because you'll have a higher success rate of not getting blown out than getting a team that's a big favorite to win, I guess. I don't know. I kind of don't believe in it, to be honest. I mean, you see my teasers every week. I tease across the number. But 2 of them I didn't actually. Kansas City -0.5, Commanders to the number at the pick'em. But maybe you could say maybe find a different one other than Detroit. If you're a believer in that, find one that you can tease within the number. But I think those are 3 really solid ones. And assuming that the Commanders are the one that blows it for us, we get to celebrate. Here's the one thing I'll say before moving on to the next game. I think Eagles fans have kind of celebrated the NFC East division title a little early, because the Washington Commanders schedule coming up here, Cowboys at home, Titans at home, at Saints, and then they play the Eagles at home.
Yeah.
Are they going to lose a game before they play the Eagles? Because I don't think so.
No, I don't think so either. I do think like obviously the Thursday night victory was huge for the standing side of things, and I saw the odds.
We lost it.
Yeah, absolutely. That it would have been Washington's to run with. They're a legit team, man. Like, and that's going to be the case moving forward. They got one in Jaden Daniels, so this is no longer Washington sitting in the bottom as the bottom dweller in the NFC East. That will no longer be the case here. But I do think for this season, I still feel pretty strongly that the Eagles are going to stay on that inside track. This is an internal thing. They've got it together more than has been the case for really like a full year and a half at this point. So I'm feeling optimistic.
The schedule's just so much harder down the stretch with Philly. You got Baltimore in there, you got Pittsburgh in there. Whereas the Commanders' only hard game is us. I mean, after that game, the Falcons at home. Falcons did not look good last week. I don't want to overreact too much to it. They are 6-5 or whatever they are, and then you have that Cowboys again. Like, I'm just saying I'm a little bit concerned, even though I don't even think it would be that much of a poor reflection on the Eagles if you go 12-5 and the Commanders go 13-4, winning out the rest of their games. I think that's a possibility. So just wanted to put that out there into the universe. I think the Eagles are the second best team in the NFC. I think they're going to the Super Bowl, but just wanted to put that out there. At 1:00, a game that I'm not betting, but a game I have a lean on. I want to bet the Chicago Bears +3.5 against the Minnesota Vikings. But we saw last time they had such a gut punch loss. They showed up so flat and did not care at all the week after the Hail Mary. You get that field goal blocked. I think that's an emotional, letdown of the high proportion.
Yeah.
I'm not going to bet it, but I do think they win the game.
I just think they might be broken and might have quit on the season overall. Like I've
They were really impressive last week, though. They were really impressive in that game against Green Bay. That's why I'm kind of, was it Shane Waldron, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, everyone's playing for their jobs. Like, I think we forget that when we kind of speak about a team quitting. Like, each of these guys still have professional careers they're still trying to shape and make sure that they're not the guy being pointed at for the blame and being on the chopping block. But so it's not like these guys are going to roll over and not try. But I do think, like, this is a pretty broken organization, far more than I expected to be even capable of being the case this season, that it finally felt like they were getting things together from the full organization standpoint. Obviously has not resulted in strong results here. So I'm avoiding this one completely. I just can't get behind the Bears for the fear that they just don't show up, which to me is always kind of on the table.
Titans at Texans. This is annoying to me because I think the Texans are such a schedule merchant, and they're 7-4, and they're not good. They're not a good football team. I'll just say it like straight up. Maybe this is a fun game. I don't know if anyone would be entertained by this at all. How many teams are better than the Texans? Detroit's better. Kansas City's better. Buffalo's better. Philly's better. Baltimore's better. Green Bay's better. Minnesota's better. San Fran's better. Pittsburgh's better. The Chargers are better. Washington's better. Arizona's better. Denver's better.
Wow.
Atlanta's where it gets tough. In my heart of hearts, I think Atlanta's better, but it's hard to make the case. The Rams are better. I think the Bengals are better. They just haven't figured out how to be better. They haven't fit the defense is so bad that's hard to make the case. I think the Texans are such total and complete frauds, losing again to the Lions that Jared Goff had 5 interceptions in. And then you obviously they blew out the Cowboys. They played close with the Joe Flacco Colts while Joe Flacco couldn't do anything on offense. They lost on the road to the Jets. The only team to lose to the Jets in the last 6 weeks. I am so out on Houston. I think there's no chance they win a playoff game. I think this team stinks.
Wow.
Yeah, they're going to win this week.
Yeah, I'm definitely not where you are with them. I think they're still a playoff team. I think
they're going to make the playoffs. Yeah.
CJ Stroud has taken a bit of a step back. We're seeing that sophomore slump. Stephon Diggs obviously getting injured, and the defense has not been quite the caliber I think we hoped they're expected this season. I still think they're a fine playoff team. To be honest, I think they're closer to that Packers mix type of team than where you're giving them credit. But yeah, I can tell you're out. I could we'll see how things play out. I'm definitely not pounding the table as a believer in this team, but I mean, they're still not a team that I'd be wanting to face on a weekly basis or as a playoff matchup. I'll put it that way.
Yeah, once you took Diggs out of the mix and Nico's coming back and he's not healthy and Tank Dell's never healthy, and I just think that
Nico's good, man.
Nico's great, absolutely. But I thought the strength of the team was having all the receivers, and that was going to be really hard for anybody to deal with. And then it kind of never materialized, even when they had those guys. But yeah, my prediction, they beat the Titans and Jags the next 2 weeks, and then they lose 3 straight at Miami, at KC, Baltimore. And they're sitting there at 9-7, but it won't probably matter because of their division. Tampa at the Giants. I'm not touching this game. Tampa was a 4-point favorite when Daniel Jones was in on Monday, and now the Giants are a 6-point underdog. I don't understand why that line moves 2 points. I actually liked Tampa when I thought Daniel Jones was going to play. I'm a little worried to bet against Tommy Cutlets. I'm not touching this one.
Yeah, there is always the vibe, the backup quarterback vibe, the slamming chicken cutlets around, everything that comes with them. So I still lean towards I think the Giants have fully pulled the plug on the season. I think it's pretty insane some of the stuff they're doing as far as the Drew Lock stuff with the contract and everything else going on. It's clear that they're ready to lose this game even more so than the Buccaneers are ready to win it. So I do lean towards the -6, but there is a little Tommy Cutlets buzz. I won't deny it.
Denver, Vegas. I don't even want to spend time on this. Denver, are they going to make the playoffs? Yes or no? That's all I'll ask you.
Yes, I like Denver.
Agree.
Yeah,
I agree. I think at this point you have to. Sean Payton's he's an awesome.
The defense is legit too, man.
Defense is legit. Patrick Surtain, Defensive Player of the Year conversation for sure. San Fran at Green Bay, really fun game. I'm not touching it with a 10-foot pole. This feels so important for both teams. Feels more important for San Fran. Yep. That's the one thing I'll say. If you made me make a pick, I would pick San Fran just out of it feeling like do or die for them. Whereas Green Bay, big game for them for sure. But if you lose, you're 7-4. If you lose for San Fran, I think it's over.
Yeah, I like San Fran outright. That I do think that this is a hungry dogs run faster play in a spot where I think you can buy them a little low. They're a better team than their record shows. They haven't put together. Injuries have been a factor, but I'm not quite as in on this Packers team as I think the general consensus, and from you specifically, Mark Henry Jr. So I like the 49ers to get a win here. I have my doubts. The Jordan Love turnover issues have been a thing.
Yeah, there's definitely Packers issues to bring up. They're also third in DVOA. All those things, there's all these metrics that point out that Jordan Love missed multiple games. They had 6 halves of Malik Willis that they've played this year or whatever it is. And
they won some of those.
They've won some of those for sure. And the defense is so weird. Some weeks it looks incompetent and some weeks it looks great. It feels like there's very little in between for them. They find a way to win every week by 1 to 3 points. And for whatever reason, the metrics love them for it. I just think they have the talent on the roster. And have I loved everything I've seen? No. I feel like I've bet on them. They've screwed me so many times this year from a gambling standpoint. But with all the frustration that I have with them, they're sitting here at 7-3 with their quarterback having missed a good amount of time and even played banged up in some of the games that he did play in. So ultimately speaking, I think that's a win for Green Bay. And I think that they're going to be a tough out for anybody once the playoff time comes. I'm just disappointed. I thought San Fran was going to be a Super Bowl contender the moment Christian McCaffrey came back, and it has not. I laid the points with them last week, and they lost outright. A game that I have maybe one of my favorite bets of the week on. I'm buying all the Arizona stock you can give me. I think there's a chance of the third best team in the NFC. And we predicted it. I think we both predicted it before the season. We both had them in the playoffs. I think we're going to be right. And I know Seattle got that win last week. This Seattle team is so up and down. Give me Arizona to roll here. I know they're a 1-point favorite. I think they win easily.
Yeah, Kyler's been good, man. He's been very good this season. So yeah, I'm still hanging in there and loving all the Arizona stock that I continue to hold. I'm with it, riding from here on out.
Philly, LA, the Philadelphia Eagles -2.5. Obviously, Jalen touchdown, yada, yada, yada. But my favorite bet of the week in Philadelphia, California, in SoFi Stadium is the Eagles. It's gonna be a half Eagles crowd, if not an 80% Eagles crowd there in LA. So give me the Eagles, lay in the number. I think the Rams are frauds. I know that they beat the Patriots and got off the schneid last week after a terrible performance against Miami. They shouldn't even have won that game if Gerard Mayo wasn't a coward. So give me the Eagles. I love the Eagles this week.
Yeah, on the same page. I also think a big day for both AJ and Devontae. That a pretty bad Rams passing defense. I think both those guys eat pretty regularly in this one, and I do think there's a pretty strong chance of a full scale Eagles blowout here. So give me the points.
Last game of the week, the Harbaugh Bowl, the Baltimore Ravens at the LA Chargers, and I'm laying 2.5 with Baltimore on the road. I said it earlier, I'm taking Baltimore -120 to win the division, and I think Baltimore is one of the best teams in the NFL, despite their defense having some issues and being 7-4. The one thing I'll say is that Pittsburgh game, the defense looked pretty good. It wasn't the defense. The defense actually seemed to figure some stuff out. Russ wasn't able to throw it all over the yard in that game. I think we see the same thing when they step up against the Chargers. I'm sure you're riding with me on this one.
Yeah, you will never, ever catch me picking Justin Herbert over Lamar Jackson. One winner, one loser. Sign me up for the Ravens. I'll take however many points you want to give me. And Herbert gave me a chance, man. He almost gave me the Burrow comeback last week. He gave him every single opportunity in the world. They were unable to snatch it there. Dude still doesn't know how to finish football games. He's playing better this year. But yeah, sign me up for the Ravens here.
Yeah, and everyone wants to whine for Joe Burrow that they're not better. And I agree. He is MVP discussion for sure. He did have a couple chances there to win the game at the end where he didn't go down the field. I was shocked that Burrow didn't go down the field. But that's going to do it for the Tough Cover Radio Show. Thanks to everybody for listening. Thanks to Sean Barnard on the ones and twos. Tough Cover, or keep it locked for the Villanova pregame coming up with John Jansen coming up, and then the Villanova game in an hour. But for now, Tough Cover Country, let's ride.